Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Taking the Supply Chain Pulse. I'm Megan with St. Ange Company, and we're glad you're with us. Today's episode features Taylor Wilkerson, the Executive Director of Design for Life, for a fascinating conversation about the power of supply chain design. Taylor's background combines formal supply chain education with hands-on experience designing supply chain solutions. Now let's hand it over to your host, Fred Kranz.
Today we have an interesting topic. We're going to sort of depart from hospital supply chain people talking about what they do, and we're going to get into a whole different area with Taylor Wilkerson. Taylor Wilkerson is the Executive Director of Design for Life, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go along. But Taylor, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Fred. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, we were talking just a minute ago, and I wrote an article yesterday about what people need to do or should be doing if they want to advance their careers, and it will help them get a job if they find themselves without one in these trying times. And one of those things gets into sort of a career path that you started out. You are not a healthcare supply chain guy by experience, are you?
No, I'm more of a pure supply chain person. I've done work across multiple industries, aerospace and defense, packaged goods, and of course healthcare, but did not start off looking at healthcare as a specialty.
Yep, you got your undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering at Vanderbilt in Nashville, and then you got your MBA at the University of Maryland. So that being said, tell us about some of the companies you work for, and then we'll get into some of the professional organizations you've been involved with. But tell us about some of the companies you work for.
Sure. So as you mentioned, I started life as an engineer and worked for about 7 years doing environmental engineering, which really created sort of a foundation of understanding a lot about manufacturing, how manufacturing leads to creating waste and how to control that waste. And then when I went back and got my MBA, I really wanted to sort of keep touch with that sort of tactical part of business, the physical side of business, and that led me to specializing in supply chain. Once I got my MBA, I started working for a company here in the Washington, D.C. area called LMI, which is a logistics and supply chain, or at the time was logistics and supply chain focused firm. They've since expanded since then, but really working with the public sector. So a lot of federal, some other not-for-profits, et cetera. And I guess I'd start off saying, when you're looking at where there are career options, don't overlook those public sector opportunities, because they do have a lot of needs for healthcare supply chain, public health and emergency response, as well as just supply chain in general. And it's really, it's a different way of looking at what supply chains can do. So I was at LMI for several years, and then I moved to a similar organization called MITRE. And what MITRE does is they operate what are called federally funded research and development centers for the federal government. So a little more strategic work. Got involved more specifically in healthcare supply chain at MITRE, and was at MITRE until about August last year. With the budget cuts that were occurring within the federal government across last year impacted MITRE's business, and unfortunately they had to cut staff, and unfortunately I became part of those cuts.
Well, that's interesting, but I had forgotten that. So actually, my article that I wrote yesterday, which this podcast will come out a couple months after I wrote the article, but it was pretty timely because you have experienced a situation where, boom, something unforeseen happened, and you had to find other options. Before we discuss that, though, you said that you mentioned just a minute ago you were talking about a different way of looking at what supply chain can do. Can you explain that to me? what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think when we go through supply chain education and even in most industry situations, supply chain is seen as sort of a means to an end, a means towards delivering product, getting product in customers' hands, and therefore driving revenue. Most of my career is I've been working in the public sector, and this includes health as well as doing work in sustainability. It's really focusing on how supply chain can help people who are in need. It's not about necessarily driving profits. It's about how can you maximize the impact of whether it's disaster response or healthcare by having a more efficient supply chain, a more agile supply chain that puts the products people need to live in their hands and in as many people's hands as possible.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a different perspective on what supply chain can do.
And that'll be getting us into supply chain design in a few minutes. But another thing I noticed when I was reviewing your background is that you have been actively involved in several professional or think tank type groups associated with supply chain. Could you tell us about those groups, the names of them, what they did, what your role was, and number two, how that has helped you personally in your growth of your knowledge base and perhaps in the movement of your career?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, there's been several organizations. I've been a member of CSCMP, or the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, for pretty much since I started my career in supply chain. I also worked with the Supply Chain Council, which is now the Association for Supply Chain Management, and most recently was chairing their Innovation and Sensing Committee, which is a board committee focused on identifying sort of the leading practices, emerging practices in supply chain. And I've also worked with the Supply Chain Risk Leadership Council. I was the co-chair of that for a while, and that's a industry group that, as the name would imply, is focused on supply chain risk and advancing the capabilities in terms of managing supply chain risks. Within all of those, I think the importance is a couple of things. One, you get to work on projects that are really investigating leading practices, where the industry is going, and you get an opportunity to take your head out of the day-to-day things that you're doing and really think about what is next in supply chain and what that can mean for your organization or your career. The second is it really becomes a really great networking opportunity, especially as you get involved in some of these project teams, because when you get involved in the project teams, it's not just exchanging business cards at a conference. It's you're working with people to try and identify a solution or identify a trend or build something, and you really get to know those people well. I know people on the teams that I've worked with, I'm still in communication with, talk to them once a month or every other month or so, and it really builds strong connections. And when I was falling victim of the layoffs last year, that was one of the first places I went to, is calling up those people and saying, hey, this is happening. I'm looking. Do you have any ideas? Do you have any thoughts or connections that are looking for someone? And that really sort of was a foundation for what I was doing with my job search. So it really is, those two things. It's the connections and the depth of connections you can get by getting more involved in those organizations, and then just understanding where the overall industry is going. And that's been a real driver for a lot of the work I've done, especially around sustainability in supply chain and risk management in supply chain.
Yep. So if I were in Towson, Maryland, how's that? I just remembered that a name from Maryland. If I were there in a community hospital of 200 beds, and I don't think they probably have one anymore. Everyone there is probably part of a system. What organizations would it benefit me, to investigate and become part of?
Yeah, so ASCM is and CSCMP are good ones in terms of general supply chain. There's an organization called the Strategic Market Initiative, or SMI, and they work more specifically in healthcare and that interface between hospitals and providers. That's a great one to investigate as well.
Yep. Strategic Marketplace Initiative. I've been
Yeah.
familiar with them for a long time. And the other point that you make, and you started earlier. You mentioned networking, and I cringe every time I hear the word networking, because I think networking is a artificial and transactional thing by itself. Becoming
Right.
involved and making friends so that people know who you are. They don't know you by name. They're not reading your name off a card. They're not somebody, they know you from interaction. I don't think that anything can match the importance that you get from that. Plus, you get the advantage of other people in a similar career path as you, their points of view and their experiences. Is that fair?
It is, yeah. And it is, as you mentioned, it's building friendships, building those deeper connections, and it works both ways, right? I mean, it's when you're in a hiring position, that's also the first place you go. You can say, "Oh, I remember working with Fred. He's a sharp guy, knows this type of supply chain process or technology. I'm going to reach out and see if he's interested or if he knows people are interested." It's a two-way street on that, and it is. You're right. It goes beyond the business card exchange, well
Yeah,
beyond it.
and given the nature of the way hiring decisions are made these days as compared to back in the Stone Age when I was starting out in business, a resume is almost meaningless now. You
Mhm.
got it, you have algorithms determining what components they need and matching up the resume, and there's no human interaction there. Uh, there's just if you don't find a way to get beyond the traditional response, you're probably going to be locked in where you are for a long time, or
Yeah,
become frustrated. So,
yeah,
and the other part that you just said, and I bring this up in this article I wrote, is, you know, make friends, but also be a friend. When someone has a situation and they contact you, if they are worthy of your help. And that's the important thing that I point out is, some Joe Schmo that you worked with that didn't know who you were when you were there calls up because he or she lost their job and want you to help them. Every time anyone you help, your reputation is on the line too. So you got to be
right.
selective, but be a friend to the people that you can help. And it comes back on you tenfold throughout your career, I believe. Now getting off the pulpit and going to another subject here. One of the things that I saw on the webpage is uh, designing for a more equitable future for all. There was a guy named Mr. Valderrama, Carlos Valderrama, is that his name? Who wrote
Yeah.
about 3 blogs on your website, and those blogs were interesting to me, and I wanted the that was one of the topics. The other one was how design thinking improves decision making in public health supply chains. Can you explain what design thinking is and what you mean by that statement?
Yeah, and Carlos is actually the founder of Design for Life, and he really set a really great vision for the organization. He understood there was this gap in terms of what was happening in the healthcare supply chains in a lot of low and middle income countries of missing that design piece and the strategic design piece. And unfortunately, Carlos passed away last fall, and it's really been a loss for Design for Life and for the community at large. And I'm glad to be part of keeping that legacy alive and keeping Design for Life going forward. Um, when Carlos is talking about design thinking and what that is in supply chain, it really is getting outside of the day-to-day tactical How much of this box do I put on a pallet today? And looking at how the whole supply chain is connected. It's very some call it systems thinking, design thinking. It's really looking at how those components are put together and how the material and the orders and the money flow through that network. So it's taking a very high level view at your supply chain. And the reason that's important is because it is easy to get very locked into those day-to-day things and looking at process improvement as how do I improve the process on my manufacturing floor or in my warehouse or in my storeroom versus looking at process improvement and supply chain improvement at that end-to-end perspective. And so what we really focus on doing is there are sets of tools out there that are for helping with that design process, and we really are trying to make those tools available and accessible to the people who are leading supply chains in these low and middle income countries.
Before we dive back in, you may be asking yourself, is my supply chain future ready? At St. Ange Company, we don't just optimize logistics, we engineer smarter, leaner, and more resilient systems from end to end. From manufacturing to retail to healthcare, our experts bring decades of experience and cutting-edge strategies to transform your operations. Visit and discover how we're shaping the future of supply chain, one solution at a time.
Yeah, I would argue that for most of us in healthcare supply chain, in our careers, I can speak for myself. We're so tangled up in the day-to-day and the transactional, the number one thing in the world is show up on time, don't get yelled at and go home on time. And the don't get yelled at historically because of the leverage the doctors had in the community, standalone community hospital model. It was a big deal. We could not explain to you an overall picture of what a supply chain looked like. We just knew we ordered stuff, got stuff, brought it to where it needed to go, and ordered more stuff. And it's probably been in the last, I don't know, for me in the last 10 years that I really started to learn about, how supply chains are organized and how they work. Most of us are totally oblivious. And so bringing science to the situation is a great thing. Now, Design for Life, you painted this area of targeted folks in small to medium-sized, under-resourced countries trying to build a supply chain. So could you sort of paint me a typical, if there is such a thing, a typical target group for you to be working with and what you would do for and with them?
Sure. So in most of these countries, the healthcare system is a national healthcare system, and therefore the supply chain and the distribution of pharmaceuticals and medical products is a government-run national system. And so the people that we work with are the people who are managing those supply chains. And just as you described, they have the same issue of the day-to-day takes over your bandwidth, and a lot of those what you would consider design decisions are decisions that were made 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Just as you were describing, how many of those situations have you been in where you do things because this is how you do them. This is the rule of thumb. You always keep 3 months of supply of this product on hand, or always need 20 of these on the shelf, and nobody asks why, right? Same thing. And they're also in a situation where a lot of times the supply chains have been designed based on political boundaries. So every region, every district needs their own warehouse, whether that makes process sense or not. And they've also, because of the way those countries have been supported or those healthcare systems have been supported, there's often different supply chains for different what we would call programs, right? So malaria, HIV, family planning, essential medicines, all operating a little bit differently. So what we're working to help those people who are leading the supply chains do is, again, take that higher level look and say, can we do this more efficiently, more effectively, and reach more people within the resources that we have? And it's really important, especially now with the dissolving of USAID and the cutbacks in U.S. commitments to funding healthcare systems in low and middle income countries. There's also been a recent cutback in support from the UK for the same area. So these are people and systems that are dealing with a significant reduction in budgets. But at the same time, one of the things that has been done over the past 10 years or so is really professionalizing supply chain for these healthcare systems. When I first started, one of the first few projects I did through USAID, it was very common in these supply chains to have nobody who had a formal supply chain background running the supply chains. You would have a pharmacist who was sort of said, okay, now you're running a supply chain. That's changed. There are a lot more people who have some level of formal supply chain training. And I think these three things come together of there's a great need. You have people who understand the need and understand what can be done in supply chain. And you now have a lot of technologies and tools that not only can address the issues of design and support design, but also are becoming much easier to use because of where technology is going in terms of user interfaces and being able to ingest data, et cetera. So those three things kind of come together as this is a really great time to be supporting these countries and supporting their mission in delivering healthcare and helping them deal with reduced resources and saying, how within these reduced resources can we serve as many people, as many clinicians as possible within our system by making our supply chains better designed, more efficient, and more effective?
So, give us an example of, I guess, a country or just a small thumbnail sketch of a discrete project you might be working at and where that might be.
Yeah. So, over my career within this area, I've done several different projects. Some of them are just sort of straight supply chain improvement projects, just looking at how supply chain is done and helping to improve the processes, to more of what we're trying to do now what we're doing now with Design for Life, which is meeting with the people who are leading those supply chains and saying, let's look at your overall supply chain. Let's identify how you can reduce the number of warehouses you're using, how we can make inventory flow more efficiently throughout your supply chain, and how you can make better procurement decisions to reduce the risk of inventory expiring on the shelf as it goes through the supply chain. And all of that to say also meeting the needs of people. And one of the things that is not always considered when you think about a healthcare supply chain that we look at as well is how far do people have to travel to receive the products they need or this care that they need? And this is starting to become an issue within the U.S. within rural healthcare. But within a lot of these countries, it is a big issue. I remember, being at a care facility and hearing the stories of people who were traveling for almost a full day to get to a clinic to find out that the clinic didn't have the medicine they needed or the immunization for their child. And then they have to travel a full day back home without getting the care they needed or the product they needed. And when you think about that, not just in terms of you missed the opportunity to care for that patient, but you think about what that patient is going to do the next time they need that product. are they going to spend 2 days going to that clinic, lose 2 days of work and or caring for their family, or if they're in a subsistence situation, doing the work they need to feed their family, for a chance that that those 2 days are going to be wasted. So you lose that trust in the system. You lose that potentially that patient coming back the next time. And so really we look at it from that perspective as well. This isn't just looking at fill rates and stockouts as numbers, but looking at it as a stockout is somebody who may not come back to get the care they need, or may not bring their family member in to get the care they need in the future.
Yeah, if you sort of look at healthcare globally, once again, from 30,000 feet, there probably are two major aspects. Number one is clinical capabilities, clinical and medical treatment capabilities, and number two is logistics. It's all it has never been realized to be as important as it is. In Vietnam, I guarantee you, this side, the logistics side, saved as many or more people than did the clinical expertise side, because we got people where they needed to be gotten to be treated immediately. So, yeah, that's an interesting point. So I would say this. I know that as a relatively small operation, incomplete in the elements you need to provide the services you want to provide, you probably need help or resource input from other outside groups. What kind of help or need are you looking for from outside groups?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So we're always looking to build partnerships to help further our mission. As a not-for-profit, of course, we're always welcome to receive funding to help with the mission. That always goes a long way. But we also look for technology providers who want to see if we can add their technology and their capabilities to the portfolio of solutions that we're offering to these countries, as well as volunteers, whether it's volunteers who want to help with designing some of the tools that we're putting out in the field, or volunteers who are interested in helping us work with the country partners that we have, in terms of workshops or education on supply chain design. So it's really we welcome company partnerships, we welcome individual volunteers, and of course always welcome funding.
So that being said, if I were someone who wanted to come and help you, or if I were a company that had probably some of the schools skill sets or tools that you need to do to fulfill your mission, how do I go about contacting your organization? What do I need to do?
Yeah, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to sniff out there. You can also send an email to director@designforlife.org, and that will come to me as well. And I welcome anyone who is interested in being part of our mission.
Great. So that's pretty much all that I had. I know I must have left something out. So what did I miss that you'd like to sort of close out and make a closing point on?
Yeah, I mean, I just would love to emphasize the power of supply chain design and what it can do, not just in our mission, but also with within regular healthcare systems. You mentioned that so many healthcare systems, people are sort of buried in the day-to-day. There really is a lot of value in looking at the overall network, and especially as health systems are growing larger, there's more opportunity to really find those kind of efficiencies across systems. And the tools are great. The company we partner with, Optilogic, has we've been really happy with the tools that they have, but also those organizations that you can get involved with. Again, not just because of the connections, but also because within those connections, you're going to meet people who have gone down this path before and who can tell you oh yes, when I started off, I thought I was going to go left, and that was the perfect way to go. And I got 100 feet down that path and realized how wrong I was. So you really want to go right here. And that's super valuable as you go through that and look at how you can improve your supply chain.
Well, thank you, Taylor. Thanks so much for the good input today. I think we've discussed some topics that we hadn't touched before on the podcast, and I appreciate the fact that you've taken time to talk with us. I'm very interested in what you're doing. People can go to the Design for Life website. You've got some interesting information on there. You got access to the 3 podcast article or the 3 blog articles that I referenced earlier. I think you're doing great work, and I wish you the best.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and glad to bring a little bit of a different topic of conversation here.
Great job. Thanks again, Taylor.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Well, that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and connect with us online so you'll never miss an episode and can catch up on all the ones you might have missed. Got a topic you're fired up about, or maybe you want to be a guest on the show? Fred would love to hear from you. Just reach out at fcrans@stonge.com. We'll see you next time.